our behavior one-on-one is about conduct, behavior, and meeting expectations. If I'm always thinking about what's in it for me, if I'm always, quote, utility maximizing, in my one-on-one intimate relations with the people in my circle of friends and colleagues at work, I will not be a very attractive person to be around. If I'm always keeping score, oh, I did that for you, so now it's your turn to do something for me. Do you like people like that? I don't, right? You like people who give out of desire to be helpful, right? Not because they always think, what's in it for me? Now, when you're on the internet and you're shopping, what's in it for me is a very reasonable attitude, right? But so Smith, in some sense, and also Hayek, has two worlds that we live in at the same time. One world where we are thinking about strangers, and one world where we're thinking about our friends and family. Do I want to say anything else about Smith? Other than the other thing I want to add is that I just think in most of our dealings that are not at a distance with strangers, which are the internet, going to the shopping mall, etc., we care about, it's a very complex and rich world that we interact with. And it's not as simple as sometimes our economic models make it to be. The last thing I want to say before starting the session is that there's a wide range of feelings here in this room about the virtues of free markets. So last night I asked some people who were talking after dinner, if 1 is a socialist and 10 is a free marketer, you might think, I'm not going to survey you, but you could think about where you are on that spectrum. And I said I was an 11, which was a reference to Spinal Tap, a movie that no one had seen at the table, but that's okay. If you've ever seen the movie, anybody seen Spinal Tap? It's actually called This Is Spinal Tap. I recommend it. It's really, it's a mockumentary. It's a fake documentary about a rock band called Spinal Tap. And their volume on one of their secrets to success is that their amplifiers, which allows them to project their music, their electric guitars, their amplifiers go to 11, whereas everybody else's only go to 10. So that gives them a big edge. Anyway, so if you think about where you are on that spectrum, some of you are a 4, some of you are an 8. There might be a few 10s in the room. From my casual conversations with you, I think there are. Wherever you are on that spectrum, I think many of you would like to see Israel get closer to 10, even though you might not want it to be 10, right? You want it to be more free market. And so I just wanted to give a little bit of unsolicited advice, because you're going to go through your life very frustrated and unhappy, because you're going to be lonely. Most people don't agree with you here. And you're going to look at the world around you and be frustrated that it's not the way you think it should be. And the only thing I want to say about that is, if you want to put a dent in the universe, if you want to practice tikkun olam, if you think you want to make the world a better place, which I recommend highly, the way to do that, there's just a few things to keep in mind as you go through life. The temptation, as some of us talked about, is to hide, is to just keep your mouth shut. Well, actually, there's 2 temptations. There's keep your mouth shut, and then there's screaming and yelling. Don't scream and yell. And keeping your mouth shut's not ideal either. So if someone asks you your opinion of something that's in public policy, and you know that you have a minority opinion, smile, be calm, don't yell, and state calmly what you think is the right thing. And if you can do that through your life, and this is something I learned from Milton Friedman, if you look at him and you watch him in the 60s, when he was a very lonely person, very few people agreed with him, he always smiled, and he always stated his views with calm confidence, which is, I think, the right way to do it. So you're not defensive, even though the person across from you thinks you're heartless. So it's very hard. You're going to naturally feel defensive. But if you actually have some confidence in your principles, then you should not be defensive. So be calm. And the biggest thing you can do to earn respect for your viewpoint is not to make the cleverest argument. It's not to make the best argument. It's not to have all the facts on your side. Because, by the way, you don't have all the facts on your side. The other side has good facts too. They're not your facts, but they have arguments for why they think the world works the way they think it does. So you have to be a little bit humble. But it's not about always, it's mostly not about facts, and it's not about who has the best argument. It's often about whose team do I want to be on? Whose team do I want to be on? Do I want to be on that team where there's the arrogant, obnoxious, self-righteous people? Or do you want to be on the team with the nice people? I want to be on the team with the nice people. So being a nice person is probably the single biggest thing you can do to convince people of your worldview. And last night I mentioned to some people a really remarkable book called The Righteous Mind by Jonathan Haidt, H-A-I-D-T, where he argues, I think correctly, that most people adopt their views first and then justify them later. He says, we're like riders on an elephant. The elephant is our heart, and the rider is our head. The head thinks it's steering the elephant, but the elephant goes where it wants to go. You don't steer the elephant. So it says that reason and our rationality is really in the back seat. It's not in the front seat driving. We think it is because, of course, we're rational people. But in fact, our emotions are very, very important. Anyway, I think that's really a good set of things to keep in mind. Lo elecha hamalacha ligmor, v'lo ata ben chorin levatel mimena. And that translates into English really badly, which is, it is not up to you to finish the work, and this is the hard part, but neither are you free to desist from it. Meaning, you are probably not going to bring the free market revolution to Israel, but you have a contribution to make. And that, if you accept that mission, that your job is to make a step in that direction, not to finish the work. You know, people say to me, wouldn't it be great if we had a book that could convince people of the virtue of free markets? There are about 250 books like that. No one book changes everybody's mind. The greatest book, there are people who don't read books, there are people who don't like books, and one book speaks to someone else's heart, but not to yours. So the analogy I like is actually another Jewish analogy about Rabbi Akiva. It's like drops on a rock. One drop has no effect on the rock, none. But a lot of drops wear the rock down eventually. So do your part, be a drop on the rock for good public policy and freedom, if that appeals to you. And if it doesn't, this is also good advice. So if you want to change the world a different way. But I think that's really important. Okay, so let's talk about cats and Uber. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide you into groups, and we're going to tackle a set of economic questions. I want you to, as in the group, you are going to argue about the right answer to these questions, and after about 10 minutes, we'll reconvene, and you'll tell me what you think the answers are, and we're going to do that 2 or 3 times, if whatever we have time for. Okay, that's the strategy today. One piece of advice, maybe more than one. If the answer to the question is something that your uncle could have told you, and your uncle's not an economist, so if you ask your uncle, who's not an economist, the right answer, and your uncle says it's X, it's probably not the answer I'm looking for. So common sense matters, but we're kind of looking for advanced common sense here, the application of economics to puzzles. You have 10 minutes. Go. So I was having lunch with some friends, and one of them lives in Yerushalayim, And she told me that her vet has this wonderful policy to reduce the feral cat. In English, we call them feral cats, cats that live on the street. How many people like the cats that live on the street in Jerusalem? How many people hate them? Yeah, I hated them at first. They're kind of growing on me. You know, I used to have a cat, and I would look at the cats in Jerusalem and think, you know, that could have been my cat in a different life. You know, it's all luck of the draw in the cat world mostly. So she said her vet. Everybody know what a vet is, right? Veterinarian animal. I should have made sure you understood what I was talking about here, but you know about the shots for diseases and things. So she said it's so nice. Our vet will take anybody who brings them a cat off the street. The vet will give the shots for free, and that way, said my friend, there's one less cat on the streets. And I thought to myself, I don't think so. But I did keep that to myself, by the way. So the question is, will the population go up, down, or stay the same? How many people think it'll go up? Raise your hand. How many think it'll go down? How many people think the population will stay the same? So the correct answer that I was looking for is stay the same. But let's hear your argument. So those who say stay the same, if we had 3 hours or a week, we'd go through each answer and you'd criticize it. And I will let people defend their answer if they want to, but what's the argument that it'll stay the same? Hey, let me give you the wrong answer. Here's the wrong answer. Well, what's one cat? Or a few? It's not going to make any difference. That's a bad answer because that's the answer your uncle would give you, right? There's no economics in that answer. It could be true, but that's not the answer we're looking for. So give me, what's the answer? Yeah.
We thought about the model of Malthus.
Of Malthus? Malthus, yeah.
That the population increases in an aspect of its resources, and that if you take one of you reduce the population by half, the same population has less participants, but the same amount of resources, and it will increase again to the same level of resources.
How will it increase? What will happen that will make the increase happen?
The weaker cats that died because of like diseases and stuff have more breeding grounds and more, they were able to survive.
So presumably, the word in English for the kittens is a litter, L-I-T-T-E-R. That's a group of newborn kittens is a litter. So within any litter, I assume some cats on the street don't make it, right? The weakest, the least healthy. So if there are fewer cats because of the vet, then the other cats that would have died will now survive because there'll be more garbage for them, right? Okay. What? So, yeah.
We have another thing that we thought, okay, intuitively, the doctor wants to encourage people to take cats off the street. But we have like Mario on our team who is allergic to cats. So he's probably, even if you get free shots, he's not going to take the cat. And we talked about the alternative marginal cost, which means, okay, maybe I get free shots, but now when I get a cat, I have to take care of him.
But that's why I said that's why I said hundreds of people. I don't expect everyone. So would the following policy work? Every time I see a cat, I kill one? It's not very nice, right? But that's the same policy, right? And I don't think it would work unless there was a sense it would work. If you killed a whole lot of them and kept killing them, you could make a dent. Yeah.
We also thought about another theory that everybody will take the cats, and then the cats will continue to what?
Multiply?
To multiply.
Prue or voo.
And then the shots won't be for free. So they will come back to the streets.
Why won't it be free?
Because now there are house cats.
There's no more street cats.
Oh, okay, but that's an extreme case where there's so many, right? I'm talking about a case where it's some people, certainly not everybody, is going to take in some of them. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to argue that it may be also decreased, because if, for example, the veterinarian do this, some others veterinarian can also adopt this policy, and it may be a policy that maybe also the city hall will take on it.
Sure.
And that's why.
If enough people did it,
Right.
if enough people did it, you could make a difference.
Right. And I also want to say that I didn't see yet cats starving to death in the streets.
Oh, I have.
So in Jerusalem and a lot. I see it once in a while, but it's not
Yeah,
a lot
but-
of cats.
So one of the great mysteries of life is, you ever see a dead bird? How often in your life have you seen a dead bird? Literally, just an entire dead bird on the street. I've seen it a few times, but we know they're dying by the millions. Where are they? So similarly, I think there are a lot of dead cats that you don't literally see, that get eaten by other creatures and thrown out, and it's gross, but yeah. If you want to turn down the cat population, so what is this like? This is like the traffic question. Do you remember our conversation yesterday about traffic on Monday? You want there to be a knob to turn down the traffic, and so your first thought is make the road wider or build a train, and it doesn't work. It works at first, but eventually the effects can be offset. Similarly here. So if you wanted to reduce the cat population, what policy would you recommend to the mayor of Yerushalayim? And one answer would be, well, I'll recommend, let's put poison in the garbage. But a better solution is birth control. If you put birth control in the garbage, then you could really actually make an impact. But the standard ways are very hard to make a difference unless you're relentless, right? Killing a few of them is not going to work. That's just bizarre, but that's probably true. Okay, let's move on. So this is one of my favorites, number 2. I used air drying. So you go to the bathroom and you wash your hands. This is a man thing. I have a feeling women don't do this as much as men, but some men, after they wash their hands, probably there's some men who don't wash their hands. I'm not going to do a survey, but some men, after they come out of the bathroom, especially if they know paper towels, this is what you do. You do a little of this, and then you do kind of this thing, or down here, because then you feel like you can't really see. If it makes like moisture, you can't really see it, you know. Okay. Now, in many of the bathrooms that I have been in the last 5 years, there's a sign that says, and they have the air dryers, right, where you push the button and they blow hot air on your hands. Or you've seen these new kind? You do this. They say, to save trees, we have installed these new dryers. And I always think, I'm not so sure about that. So what do you guys think? What would happen if a lot of people started saying, I'm not going to use the paper towels, I'm going to do this, or I'm going to use the punchy thing? What would happen to the number of trees? How many people think it would go up? How many people think it would go down? How many people think it would stay the same? That is correct. No, excuse me. If it will go down. There'll be fewer trees, in my opinion. Somebody want to justify why it'll be the same number? Yeah, a brave person.
Maybe humorous.
What?
Maybe it's a humorous answer. But first of all, this kind of stuff has found to be full of germs. So when you actually use it, you might get sick, and then you'll have to use a whole bunch of tissues.
That is a humorous answer. It's not within the scope of the question. It could be true, but I want you to think about what's going on in the economics.
What we thought about was the same as your coal running electric cars from yesterday. So the number of trees, people will use less paper towels. So probably there will be less demand for trees, and the price will go down, and then the demand will increase in other kinds of.
Okay, so that's half right. When the price goes down, the demand for, first of all, there's two things that you need to think about. One is, in some situations, the supply curve is very close to horizontal. So shifts in demand for those economists out there, all it does is change the quantity. It doesn't have a big effect on price, okay? That's number one. But number two, after you shift demand and price goes down, that's the end of the story. We're in a new equilibrium with less trees being used because, well, that's a longer story. If you want to talk about that during the break, we can. But the bottom line is that, to take a simpler example, if everybody in the world started using email instead of letters, and everybody in the world started drying their hands on their pants, and newspapers all went out of business, do you think there would be as many trees planted around the world to make paper? No way. No way. There'll be fewer. Now, there's a big difference between a tree farm and a forest. Do you understand that difference? A tree farm is a place where trees are planted in rows for the express purpose of cutting them down to turn them into furniture, paper, etc. A forest is a wild, organic place. I really like forests. I have no love for tree farms. However, many people believe that tree farms are important. Why? Because they absorb carbon dioxide, right? So if you care about the environment, you should use lots of paper towels, right? Because that encourages the demand for trees, which means there'll be more trees planted, which means there'll be more carbon dioxide absorbed, and then the world will be a greener place. Yeah.
But that's only if you think that there is the trees that we use is only from tree farm. But it is
Thank you. That was the point I was trying to make. So it depends. If you're chopping down ancient forests to make paper towels, then using the paper towels is awful, right? I don't think so. I don't think so. I think that's mainly used for furniture, but it is a problem. And the reason in South America, in Brazil, it's a problem. Will you remind me when we get to question 4 to talk about that? Because that's a really good point. Okay, last point on this.
There is one point we raised, which is even if you're cutting down ancient forests, it won't necessarily, stopping that won't necessarily help the environment, because you'll be using more electricity and you'll be creating another form of pollution instead.
I'm going to cut it down with a handsaw. I'm not going to use any electricity, and I'm going to use thousands of people to carry it out.
Talking about the air dryers. I mean, you're just increasing.
Oh, that part. Yeah, good point. That's a good point. That's relevant also. Yeah. Doesn't use very much, but if everybody's using them, it could make a difference. Okay, question 3. It should be, if a lot of people, again, not everybody, but actually it wouldn't matter in this case, if a lot of people become vegetarians, what happens to the chicken population? How many people think it goes up? How many people think it stays the same? How many people think it goes down? So this is really the same question as the last question, right? It's the same question. So what do you think I think the answer is? How many people think I think the answer is it goes up? How many people think I think it stays the same? How many people think I think it goes down? Yeah, I think it goes down. Why? Why do I think it goes down? Yeah, it's a...
Because the chicken that we eat, we produce them.
Yeah. And therefore
the demand goes down.
And therefore, not as many people are going to raise chickens, or people who raise chickens aren't going to raise as many. Right now in America, there are over 1 billion chickens alive right now. There's about 4 chickens for every American walking around waiting to be killed. Now, they don't know it, So they have a decent life. Some say that they have a sad life because they live in small spaces. But it turns out when you let a chicken run free, it has a very hard life. It gets a lot of diseases and it gets eaten by animals. It's very, a chicken's life is challenging. Chickens are very nervous. They have a hard time. But you think about it, if people didn't eat chicken, I mean, the point of this question is that you would think that being a vegetarian would increase the chicken population, right? But you would, because there are fewer chickens that get eaten. So there's more chickens alive. But it's on what? It's not true, because they just won't raise as many.
Won't the price go down on chickens and then a lot of poor people will eat more chickens?
No. Okay, so that's, I wish that's the same analysis that this group gave on the trees. And maybe we'll have a breakout session on supply and demand tonight for people who are really fascinated by this. But the answer is that demand is already built into the demand curve. And I could show you with a picture, but I need a pad of paper and we could walk through it. But the answer is there will be, let me say it differently. The non-vegetarians will eat more chicken, but it cannot make up for the decrease of the vegetarians. Okay, and I'll show you that in a picture if you want. Yeah.
We had another point that maybe it will open a new market. I mean, now it sounds ridiculous, but let's think about it. We have like...
Now it sounds ridiculous because you've heard the discussion, or?
Because, I mean, we thought, okay, so maybe people will raise chickens at home, like you do cats or something. And then you open a new market, or chickens will run on the streets like cats.
Correct.
So
it's possible.
Yeah, so maybe because of that it will stay the same. Because now it's popular to have a chicken at home.
So first of all, my sister-in-law owns a chicken. She lives in Seattle, Washington. Who was the camp counselor in Seattle? So can you imagine? It's a real city, right? You remember what it looks like? She might have two even for the eggs. A chicken lays, in America, a chicken lays about 350 eggs a year, excuse me. 350, which is one a day. A third world chicken, which is close to what my sister-in-law has, because a third world chicken, an American chicken, is bred to be an egg layer, gets massive amounts of health. I'm not sure how important the hormones are, but they stay healthy because they get the shots, and they're fed very well. So they lay one a day. A third world chicken lays about 50 eggs a year, which is one a week. American chickens are much more productive, which is weird because you'd think a chicken is a chicken, but it's not. So in theory, chickens could start to run wild. I thought of this question because I once had a conversation with a hair cutter who said it was evil that we ate meat and killed cows. And I said, but think of all the happy cows that are born who never would be born unless we ate them. And she said, I don't think that's a good thing. And I said, well, what should we do now? And she said, we should just let them roam free in the streets. The cows that were already born, let them live a cow life in the wild. I suggested that cows are not really prepared for such a life, and neither are chickens. They wouldn't live very long in the short run anyway. Yeah, there's a comment over here. One more? Yeah, here.
I agree with that the amount of chicken will go down if everyone will be vegetarian. But I only want to mention that I think that's the main issue of the vegetarians.
The main what?
The main argument of the vegetarians is not that they want the population of the...
Exactly. Beautiful. So, I agree. So let me give you another example. I mentioned elephants earlier. I think elephants are beautiful creatures, and I'm happy that they exist, that they're not extinct. There's a big problem with elephants in Africa. Do you guys know what it is? They get killed for their tusks. The tusks are considered an aphrodisiac, which I'd love to know the Hebrew word for that. Anybody know what the Hebrew word for aphrodisiac is?
שיקוי אהבה.
לא, מעורר חשק יותר. חשק, זה לא...
Anyway, do we all, it doesn't matter. So the question is, the reason, and this is the same question, let me do the whale question, and then we'll come back and we'll do we have 2 points here, the question about the vegetarians and the question about the forests, okay? So if we started eating whales in greater numbers, what would happen to the whale population? How many think it would go up? How many people think it would go down? How many people think it would stay the same? It's so nice that everything's got some support, but I think it would go down. And the reason is that whales aren't owned by anyone, and you can't make a profit farming a whale because they're wild. You can't fence them in. They have one. Well, they have 7. They have Shamu. But you can't farm them in general, and they get killed in the wild. Now, here's the question. What's the difference between whales and chickens? The answer is, let's see, one's a bird. No, the answer is that you can farm chickens, but you can't farm whales. Now they're starting to try to farm tuna in giant, massive, enormous nets. And if you do that successfully, an increase in the demand for sushi will increase the number of tuna that are raised. But wild tuna cannot be farmed, almost by definition, right? So the point I want to make with these examples is about property rights and the incentives to take care of stuff. And it's also about unintended consequences. So in Africa, to preserve the elephant population, some countries have made it illegal to shoot an elephant. Has that worked? Not very well. Do you know why? It's very profitable to shoot an elephant. And so the people who are in charge of catching the people who shoot them are not easily kept on the job, okay? Plus, the people who are shooting them, they don't want to be seen. So they try to do it in ways where they're not going to be caught. So in the countries that have made whale shooting, elephant shooting illegal, their elephant populations have continued to fall. But there's a different strategy. The different strategy is to make it legal to kill an elephant and to charge a very high price. You still have a problem, though, because the elephant is wild. So what they've done is they've given villages in some countries the right to sell a license to kill an elephant. Okay? Do you understand? So they sell for about $10,000. So you're a poor African village. If someone comes to shoot an elephant near your village, you can sell that right for $10,000. The people in the village really like that, as you might expect. Guess what they do when they see somebody killing an elephant without a license? They don't like it. So they have some incentive to prevent illegal shooting of elephants near them. In the countries that have done that, the elephant population has increased. So this comes back to your point, right? What if you just think it's immoral to kill an elephant? Which I probably do, okay? But if you care about the elephant population, ironically, you might want to allow people to kill them in order to preserve the size of the population. But I understand that for some people it's a purely moral issue. The problem is that the effectiveness of the ban is very small. One more example like this. What?
They're different from the chickens because you produce chickens, you don't produce.
Right, but if you protect the elephants that live near you, they will produce themselves because they'll prue or voo, and it'll turn out that their population will grow. So I have to make a confession, slightly embarrassing. I'm 60 years old. That's not the confession. But I was born in 1954. So I was a freshman in college in 1972 in the United States. I have never smoked marijuana in my life. I know two other people who are 60 years old who can say that. I don't think it's a very big group. I've also never done cocaine, so I'm kind of, it's embarrassing, but that's me.
We also have a word for that in Hebrew, sachi. It's okay, it's good.
So I say that because I'm in favor of drugs being legal, recreational drugs. I'm also in favor of medical drugs being legal without a doctor's prescription. And I think people should be responsible for their own health. I think that's really an important part of being a grown-up, is that you are responsible for your health, not someone else. Okay? Now, drugs are awful. And I mentioned that part about my experience because I want to make it clear that my support for legalized drugs is not because I can't wait. I have no interest in them, okay? Now, let's suppose you're on the other side. You think they're awful, like me. And so for me, I think the goal of an adult life is to learn how to restrain yourself rather than being restrained by outsiders, okay? What is called in English paternalism. I don't think the state should be paternalistic. I think a parent, a mother or a father should look out for their children, but I don't think the state should look out for me. I say that knowing that I will make mistakes. I say that knowing that many people will make mistakes. So I get into arguments sometimes with people about this, and they say, do you know what cocaine does to a baby when her mother is a cocaine user? Yeah, it's horrible. And my answer to that is, do you know what the ban on drugs in the United States has done to the police departments of the United States? Do you know what it's done to the budgets of those police departments? Do you know what it's done to life on the street in the cities where drugs are traded? And because they're illegal, the price is very high and the profits are very large. And as a result, people kill each other over the opportunity to make those profits, including lots of children who are caught in the crossfire. And late today, this week, my guest on Econ Talk wrote a book about what drugs are doing in American prisons. Do you know that prison gangs in America are running wildly profitable businesses selling illegal drugs to other people inside the prison? And because of those profits, they extend their reach outside the prison onto the streets. It's the most evil thing we do in the name of helping people. Now, I think drugs are awful, but you got to look at the real effect, not the effect that you imagine would happen if everything worked out right. I understand the urge to stop people from using drugs using the power of police. In America, at least, it is an utter and despicable failure. And when you confront people with that, those of us who were talking last night, they'll say, yeah, but drugs are bad. It's a very hard argument. It's like the people who say, well, we need to spend more money on education because the children are important. Yes, they are. And there's no evidence, none, almost none, in America that spending more on education leads to better outcomes. And the answer that you get back when you say that is, well, there's two answers, but it's for the children. But the second answer is, well, we just need to do it better. And my answer to that is, well, we've tried for 40 years. In those 40 years, we have quadrupled the amount we've spent on children, corrected for inflation, and we've had no measurable impact. That doesn't mean it was bad. It's possible that if we hadn't increased it, the amount, the schooling would have been even worse. But the evidence is pretty powerful that your strategy isn't working. Maybe it's time to try something else, right? Maybe. Okay. So let's have some fun here. So this is a true story. Uber has a special thing, which is called, how many people have used Uber? Raise your hand. Okay, so those of you who haven't, here's what happens. As Michael Eisenberg pointed out the other night, I press a button on my phone, I hit the app, it pulls up a map of where I am, and I see on the map where I see on the map where the Uber drivers are on my map. And it says 3 minutes until someone comes to get you. Because they're going to send a signal to the drivers who have the app, and they're now going to see that there's a customer, and they will assign one of those drivers to me. The drivers of Uber, this is important, the drivers of Uber have total flexibility on how much they work. They can work 18 hours a day, or they can work nothing if they don't feel like it, or they can work 4 hours a day. Here's the interesting part. If it's raining out and a lot of people are trying to get a ride, you will get a message on your phone before you submit your request that says, surge pricing in effect, all prices, and then there's a multiple. All prices are 1.7, say, times the usual price. Do you want a request? And you have a choice, okay? So in Sydney, Australia, a couple months ago, there was a terrorist attack in a cafe in a part of Sydney. And a lot of people they didn't know exactly what was going on. They wanted to get out of that area. The Uber price to go to the airport from that location was $120, and that is evidently many times higher than it normally is, okay? Similarly, if it's a snowstorm in Manhattan, in New York, the price could be 4 times the usual price. So a cab ride that would be $18 is going to be $72. So a lot of people complained about this, and as a result, in New York City, they have agreed to limit the amount of the surge pricing, okay? So I want you to get in your groups, and I want you to just think about what is good and bad about surge pricing, and do you think it should be legal? Question?
Yeah, can you just explain like what's price gouging is?
What?
The title, I think a lot of people.
Oh, so price gouging is an expression in English that people use for a suddenly high price, usually during a natural disaster like a hurricane or a tornado, a snowstorm. A lot of things get more expensive very suddenly, and as a result, the price goes up. And gouging is a gross thing. It means like to dig out. So it's like they're taking some of your flesh, the seller. So it's a very negative term for the seller who raises price dramatically in the face of a disaster. So I want you to think, is it good or bad, or should it be legal? Go. There's a hurricane in Florida. It knocks down people's houses. So if you then load your truck up with lumber, with wood, to help people repair their houses, you make a lot of money, all right? Now, are you exploiting people? Are you taking advantage of them in their hardship by getting a higher price for your wood? And the answer is kind of, yeah, kind of. And my answer, it would be a better world if what?
You would sell it for the regular price.
If you would go down with your truck and sell it for the price you usually sell it, which is what the law tries to get people to do. Now, what do you think my answer to that is?
You are taking risk, and the risk.
So one argument, that's actually not my argument. That's a great point, right? You could say, well, they're entitled. What if they get down there and they find out They drove for 6 hours, and turns out there's no demand for their wood. So there's a risk, there's uncertainty. But my answer would actually be, how many people will do that? It's a great idea. In fact, you shouldn't even charge for it. It's a time of hardship. Other things have been disrupted. You should go down there and give wood. I think that's better. I think charity is a wonderful thing. I'm in favor of it. Unfortunately, I don't think it's as common as it might be, right? So, as an economist, at least in the world we live in today, I know that if we stop the price from rising, you get less wood in Florida. And if I stop the price of Uber rising, I get fewer people willing to get in their car on a snowy night and drive people around. But here's the incredible thing. Think about this. We got to stop in a minute, and I can't. This is so poetic to me that I can't use the mic. It's too artificial. So here's the deal. Think about the following. There's a terrorist attack in the center of Sydney. As a result of that attack, the demand to get out of there goes through the roof, goes up a lot. So to meet that human desire, what Uber does is it pulls in a lot of people to help those people get out. It's true, it's going to cost them a lot, okay? And then we could debate whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but the point that I never thought about until the Sydney example is that without Uber, there's no way of knowing there's a terrorist attack in the center of the city for most drivers. Think about that. The Uber driver who sees the price go up and says, if you get in your car right now, you can make 4 times what you usually make. How do you get that in? Remember I said, wouldn't it be great if people just did it on their own? And we said, well, we understand that people are flawed. They're not going to all go to help volunteer, right? When there's danger, most people run from it, not toward it, right? Right? It would be great to live in a world where everybody said, oh my God, there's a terrorist attack, let's go help the people who need to leave, who want to get out of there. We know that in real life that doesn't happen, but think about it. Even if people were good, how would they know there's a terrorist attack? I understand they could see it on Twitter, they might watch it on the news, but if you're not watching on the news at the right time, your Twitter feed is off, you're not on Twitter, how do you know that there's people in need? And Uber is sending out a signal, an alert, an alarm that says, go to this area. They don't have to know why. They're told there's a profit to be made, and that encourages them to go do it. That's an extraordinary thing. And it's a vivid, dramatic example of how prices generally discourage some people from doing something, encourage others. So the high price says, think about this, we're going to talk about this. You're not worried about the terrorist attack. You know where it is, it's not near you, and you're going to stay where you are. So you're not going to, but you need a cab to go somewhere else. When you turn on Uber and you go, oh my gosh, it's 4 times what it usually is. I'm going to wait till later. Freeing up the cabs for the people that drive the cars, or the people who are scared and need to travel, right? So price is doing all kinds of complicated things. One more example like this. There's a hurricane in Washington, D.C. where I live. A friend of mine, his chimney fell over. He called a carpenter, a chimney guy to fix his chimney. Not a carpenter, a mason it's called. He called a mason to fix his chimney. It was a fortune. He said, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to wait a while. Because there were people whose houses fell down, and the masons who were doing that work made a lot of money, right? So what really happened is that my friend got a knock on the door from his neighbor and said, could you do me a favor? Could you not fix your chimney? Because I need my house fixed. I know you've got a guy there to fix your chimney. Could you free him up? But that's what the price said to him. The price said, don't do something that's not really important right now, because it's really expensive. So my point about Uber is that prices send signals to pull resources in different directions. The Sydney example shows you a really dramatic example of how that sends information, not just transferring resources, but information that changes people's behavior. This is a true story. Well, my part of it's true, and then we're going to break. I got an Uber ride to get to the airport to come here from my house in Washington. I'm about 40 minutes from one of the airports I was going to. So when you punch in Uber, you don't have to tell where you're going. You can, because then the driver already has it built into his system. He's got Waze, and he's got an Uber app that tells him where to drive. So I felt since it's a relatively long ride, he should know that that's what he's getting into. By the way, in general, they can't refuse a ride. If they do, Uber doesn't like it, right? So he was kind of stuck, but I wanted him to know. So I said I was going to the airport. He gets in the car. He goes, thanks. I get in the car. He says, thanks for letting me know. I said, it's a long ride. He said, oh, it's not that long. He said, I once took a guy on a 4-hour ride. I said, what did it cost? $750. Uber is by mile and time. I said, $750? He said, yeah. He said, and he gave me a tip. And you don't tip on Uber generally. It's already it's not the custom to tip. Your tip is giving him a good rating. And by the way, he rates you also. If you're drunk, you throw up in his car. You make him wait. He give you 3 stars, 2 stars. So usually people don't tip. On the $750 ride, the passenger gave the driver $100. I said, what was that about? He said, I asked the guy the same thing. I said, why didn't you fly? Why didn't you take a train? Why didn't you rent a car for $30? You spent $850. It's nuts. You know what the guy said? He said, right now, I have on my body $250,000 worth of jewelry and gold. I'm on my way to sell it, and I'm going to make $80,000. So $850 is like nothing. What's the next question? It still doesn't make any sense. Would you rather rent a car, take a train, and have the $850? It's still crazy. The guy said, I didn't want to be alone. I was scared. I've got all this, I got $250,000 on my body. I could get robbed on a train. I could be chased in a car by somebody who sees me. But then what's the next question?
How do you trust the taxi?
Why are you telling the guy in the car, you've got $250,000, right? You know what he said? The guy said, well, but Uber knows that I'm in your car. Right now, you're in the system. If anything happens to me, you're not going to get away with it. Incredible, bizarre. Anyway, thanks, folks.